Civil War Days is back this weekend. It's your chance to experience what it was like to live during the 1860s. There'll be 2 full days of infantry drills, artillery demonstrations, and a vintage baseball game at the historic Fort Wayne. And here to bring us back in time is William Eichler, Vice Chairman of the Historic Fort Wayne Coalition. William, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Tell us a little bit about Historic Fort Wayne.
Historic Fort Wayne, actually, when it opens during the Civil War and first sees soldiers, actually is not in Detroit at this point in time. Detroit is much smaller, and we're 2 miles south. It's at a strategically advantageous place to defend the city via the river, which was the way soldiers and men moved during the 19th century, not having the roads that we have today.
And how long, I mean, obviously it's been there since the 1860s, but it's had a number of iterations and sort of expanded over the years.
Sure, like everything, life evolves. As the government needed it in service, the fort serves from the Civil War through enlisting men for the Vietnam conflict, and then actually after the end of World War II, parts of it started to turn into a museum. Were given to the Detroit Historic Museum, like the Star Fort, the main focal point. And then by the 1970s, the rest is turned over.
All right, so let's talk about this weekend. What can visitors expect when they come to Civil War Days? They can expect to see sort of what it was like to live back then?
Well, I always get asked, what can you see? And I put the question back to you. There are so many senses that we have. You can see things on TV. You can see things in a book. You can see, smell, taste, touch. All your senses are engaged, whether it's seeing the life of the infantryman, and what you see here is common to what a Union infantryman, enlisted men would have carried on the march, whether you see Union or Confederate soldiers. Detroit was a thriving metropolis during the war, and let's go and see the civilian life from there as well.
And some of the things we're showing right now, we were just panning and seeing some of the food. So tell us a little bit about what some of the men that served would have carried and what would they have eaten?
Well, a Civil War veteran by the name of John Billings wrote a book called Hardtack and Coffee, and he talked about the full ration, and then he talked about what they got on the march. This is what a Union soldier on average would have gotten for 1 day on march. It's hardtack and coffee, which is the name of Billings's book, and then salt pork, or salt, in this case, salt bacon, and there's about a pound of crackers, a pound of meat, and 2 ounces of coffee, and that's a day.
And that's a day. I mean, we're used to like maybe some vegetables in there, but that's not something that would last, so they probably couldn't take it.
They could get what was called desiccated, which was a pressed dried vegetables, and of course soldiers were really good at liberating, or what they called foraging, and so they could augment as well.
All right, and then we move down here where we have some of the other items that includes, for instance, I see a comb, a watch, and how close can people get to see some of these things when they're at the historic Fort Wayne?
When you're at the fort, this is where today the camera pans it and you see it at a distance. This weekend you can walk right up and talk to people using these things and actually feel what the wool feels like.
Right. All right, so if you would like to actually see these things close up, you can go check out the annual Civil War Days this coming weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, and more information at historicfortwaynecoalition.com. William Eichler, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate the history lesson.
Appreciate it.